Good morning, everyone. This is Colin Young, Director of Field Operations, filling in for Stefan Underwood this month. Very excited to get going. We'll get going here in just a minute or two, but just wanted to just kind of get through just a couple housekeeping items. We've got Maureen behind the camera. She'll be taking questions throughout this. She's also attaching the documents and links to our handout that we've got along for this presentation. I know that's a big request. So she's going to throw that in as a file to download if you guys don't have Google Drive access, and she's also throwing it in as a Google Drive link. So if you guys want to follow along, there's a couple options for you there. Really excited to get going here shortly with John Barlow, one of our seasoned veteran coaches at our headquarters location here in Arizona, and we're going to chat with him a little bit about some of the things he's learned along the way as a coach in that space and how we can apply a lot of that to a lot of different environments. So we'll just get going here in just a minute. Don't worry if you can't see any video. We're just going to launch that here in a moment. And then the last piece, if you guys have questions or comments or want to follow up here with us on the webinar, please email us at continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. That goes to Stefan and I. Please do not email Hannah McElwain. I know that a lot of the reminders for the GoToWebinar comes from her, but again, it's just purely because she's the owner of the account, not necessarily because she's involved with these events. So please, continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. And again, we'll get rolling here in just a second. All right, wonderful. Good morning. Again, I am Colin Young, Director of Field Operations, filling in for Stefan Underwood this month. He's out this week. So with me, I've got John Barlow. Worked with John for some time now. He's kind of a veteran, I guess, within our facilities now. You probably will deny it. But really excited to have him here with us to talk about a few things that you've learned and kind of a framework that you use for your coaching style that's been really successful in our API environment, which can be kind of very challenging at times. So thank you for coming on and joining us this month.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, and maybe for those who don't know who you are, again, you're kind of a dedicated coach. You don't go out and do as much of the education and those types of things. Like, you just coach your ass off here every day. So maybe kind of introduce yourself, give a little bit of a background to our audience for those who may not know you.
Yeah. Hey, guys, my name is John Barlow. I've been here at the Exos Phoenix location, the headquarters, for just about 7 years now. I originally started my coaching here with a lot of high school and college athletes, and now I've transitioned kind of to our pro elite side, where those are the bulk of the athletes and clientele I work with. And that transition from the high school and college programs through to the more pro elite setting has kind of sparked some of the ideas and interest I've had behind this topic of how to really build an engaging environment for your athletes to train in. Just a little bit of a background on that. When I first started coaching at Exos, I was all deep diving into the programming. That was kind of my main interest, just on the X's and O's. What can I do to create the best program to deliver for the athletes for their physical and psychological needs? And what I kind of, the biggest point I missed out on is forgetting that a lot of the athletes that I worked with, they didn't have the same drive as I might have had to work out. They loved their sports, they loved what they did on the court or on the field, but did not have the same motivation to get under a bar or push weight the same way we did. So I just put all my effort into programming, and it actually worked okay for the first handful of years because a lot of the clients I worked with hadn't made it yet. They were aspiring Division II, Division III, or high school athletes who hadn't quite got to the level they wanted, so they're really hungry. And so that was almost a pat on the ego that didn't really help me out, because later on, as I got to more of a pro and elite setting, I found out that a lot of these guys at the professional level, they don't like working out. They're not motivated by getting to the next level, because a lot of them already are at the top level. And so just writing down a good workout for them that had all the reps and sets needed to get their body where it needed to be wasn't motivating enough for them. So I kind of had to go back to the drawing board and think, what can I do here to make an environment where these guys want to be at Exos training, where they might never love lifting weights, but they love being part of the culture here and being in an environment where they can do the things necessary to get their body ready for the upcoming season or battle any injury they've been going through.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of an interesting point to me. I know I've been kind of victim of describing kind of the corporate or general population space and training that population versus the elite athletes, and where even I've said the programming is much more important for those elite athletes trying to get from that 99.8 percentile to 99.9 percentile. Whereas with our population, we just need to get them in the door a lot of times for someone who's maybe just coming to Group X classes or working in a typical corporate space. So it's kind of interesting for me to hear that when we were discussing this topic a little bit with you, and taking a lot of the principles that I've looked at with my staff and some of our education materials on the corporate space, specifically that kind of motivational science or behavior science piece of it. And I think that's kind of how we're going to frame our discussion a little bit today, is around that. So maybe kind of you want to expand on that a little bit and kind of kick us off that way.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when I was asked to do this webinar, the topic of how to build engagement and buy-in in a session really interested me. And it was a bit of a challenge to put my thoughts to paper. I think a lot of times us as coaches, we have ways of going about things that we just inherently do and know. And it's a little different to formulate our thoughts. And so as I was going through this, the self-determination theory really stuck out to me. And that basically just addresses human needs, human motivations, and different ways we can tap into those. So within that, there's relatedness, which is a human's basic need to feel involved, to feel valued and cherished and part of a greater whole. There is competence. Obviously, we all like things we're good at. And so that's basically someone's ability in there to perceive how well they can accomplish something. And the final thing is autonomy. We don't just like to be motor morons who are told what to do. We like to actually have choice and ability to choose our own path and direction. And so those are kind of three pieces when I program and when I coach, I try to address, aside from just the X's and O's of what's on the paper, what's on the whiteboard for the workout that day.
Yeah, and we've kind of touched on some of these topics in past webinars, kind of lightly skirted around them a little bit. But I think for how you've put things together and packaged it for us today, you've got kind of two pieces that you really think through prior to your sessions, or when you're working with a group, new group or returning group. Kind of, at least how you described it to me, was kind of the coaching side of things and cueing and that aspect and communications piece, but then also the programming piece.
Yeah.
So I don't know, do you want to kind of start with one or
sure.
a specific topic?
Yeah, just to touch on that, when I'm thinking about how to build relatedness, how to build confidence or autonomy, I kind of break it down into two different areas. One being like my coaching and communication style, that being any sort of interaction I have with the athlete. The other being programming. This is more things that I would think of beforehand to implement into the session, not so much things I think of on the fly. So kind of the hands-on coaching style with the athlete, then what I do behind the scenes to prep to build those three kind of human motivational topics. So the first one we talk about today is relatedness. And there's many different ways you can go about this, but a big thing from the coaching and communication style, I think, to set off, like, number one, get your athlete trusting you, is having a one-on-one interview. And I think, in an ideal world, we sit down 15, 20 minutes. I get to know them a little bit, talk about why they're here. So that's the ideal world, but I understand we don't always work in ideals. And even here at the Legacy facility, where a lot of times people think everything is just tic-tac-toe, it's not. If we have 20 athletes entering for one combine day, there's no way I have 20 minutes to sit down with each and every one of them that day. And so ideal situation might be sit down for 15 to 20 minutes with them, but I mean, at least I'm trying to touch them either before the session or after the session, and just let them know that I'm here for them, to get to know a little bit about them. And then hopefully I can touch into their goals a little bit. With the whole goal sort of thing, I had a recent learning, actually. I was sitting down with a NBA player. He's been in the league for 9 or 10 years. and I wanted to hear about his goals. I knew he was a little bit hesitant about coming to Exos and training. I heard from some of his past strength coaches that he didn't really like to lift weights or was afraid of getting too big, and so, okay, I get it. But I wanted to hear what his goals were, and his first thing he said to me was he really wanted to lose weight. And I'm looking at this guy, and he's sculpted like a Greek god, 200-pound guard, thinking, this guy doesn't have any weight to lose. And so that was my first thought, but luckily I caught myself, because if I told this guy, hey, those goals are asinine, they're not what we're looking for right now, you need to be focused on X, Y, and Z, I'm going to automatically just lose his trust. I'm not going to be able to build any empathy there. And so I think the big thing to build relatedness in that kind of first contact, whether it be an athlete interview, a sit down, or an informal one, is to just hear them out, hear what they're coming for, and let them know that you understand and that you hear their goals. Because the last thing someone wants is to be corrected or just to be told what they're doing, what they're going for is wrong. Sure, their goals might be completely out the window. You don't have to tell them that day. You can wait till they get to know you a little bit and then go from there.
Sure. Yeah, and it's funny, you kind of described that situation, not always having a ton of time to be able to sit down with someone who might have unrealistic goals, someone who doesn't really like to train, someone who, again, is not quite bought into our process. I mean, so much of that could describe anyone at any of our sites, right, unless you'd said, an NBA player. And so it's just kind of interesting how that very much mirrors our own, scenario in any environment, right, not just an athletic environment or whatnot. So, what are some of those things that you do, or those questions that you ask, or tactics that you bring to play when you're having those intake sessions? Because I think at most of our corporate sites, we have fitness center orientations, we've got wellness coaching sessions, we've got kind of sessions that are designed to set people up for success with personal training. What are some of those things that you do to kind of bring that empathy to life?
Yeah, and so, to bring that empathy to life, I think you have to take a very personal approach with the person. And it sounds very basic, but you got to show them that you care, right? And so sometimes the first question to ask is not what are your goals, but just ask them a little bit about themselves, how long they've been working at the site, where they grew up. And it doesn't need to be a full-on 10-minute discussion about those things, but just showing a little bit of interest outside of just what are you here for. And then so once I get to know them a little bit, maybe where they're from, maybe something about them, I try dive into, so what are you doing here? So is there any, how can I help you? I think we're so quickly pressed to tell them all about Exos, tell them all about what we have to offer, as opposed to just listening to them and seeing where they're at. And I think listening skills are very underrated. I remember doing a drill in college where we just had to listen to a classmate for 2 minutes. We couldn't say anything, and it was super, super hard. So I always try to be slow to speak and quick to listen in those settings, maintaining eye contact. And again, you're not trying to really change their goals or deep dive and create the perfect 8-9 week long training plan. We're just getting to know them a little bit. And the more they can build that trust with you, the more they'll actually listen to what you have to say. Yeah. There's a funny story I heard when I go to vacuum salesman. And I know you haven't heard this, but okay, it's different. But Colin, imagine a vacuum salesman comes to your door and starts knocking on you and tries to sell you on the Airmaster 5000. Sure. You're going to close the door and not have a word to say. But if your best friend or your brother comes up to you and tells you about this vacuum, you probably listen to him for a little bit. It's the same sort of thing, right? If once people trust us and understand us, we can tell them crazy things and they actually believe us. It's true.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Man, that caught me a little bit off guard. But you did mention something that I liked, and it sounds like it's something that you consciously program into, again, whether it's a new group of individuals coming in, probably. Yeah. So again, it mirrors, I think, a lot of our sites where maybe we're running a program, we've got a lot of new people that we've never seen before, we're trying to get through them and get to know them and get them started and bought into what we're delivering. But you said you can't get to everybody. Right. So you talked about kind of finding 10 minutes around a session. Tell me kind of how that maps out or how you think through that process.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing we're trying to capture with that interview process is show them that we care, in my opinion. And so again, that doesn't have to look like sit down before, it could be before or after. And so how that might look is, number one, coach being early to the session. That's huge. Yeah. I've even seen, coaches running down last minute to a session. I've done it before. It just doesn't set the athlete up for success, the client up for success. So I always try to be down there 10 minutes early. And that way I can download with anyone I haven't met before, just might even be, if there's a few people, it might even need to be 2 or 3 minutes only, but it goes a long way just to build a bit of a relationship. And then I know sometimes we're hard pressed as coaches and trainers to rush to the next session. We have busy days, but on days where we might have 15 minutes between a session, stay a little bit afterwards. I think people can tell when we are authentic and we genuinely want to spend time and get to know them, as opposed to when they're just a kind of a pawn in our day. And it's 10 o'clock, session's over, we move to the next. So as hard as it is with our busy lives and the kind of franticness of the coaching lifestyle, trying to be present with them and just build relationship front end, back end, and not be in such a rush. I think especially in America nowadays, we're in such a hear them, listen to them, and be authentic, and that's kind of a cliche thing, like what does being authentic, look like? I think we talk about it a lot, and what does it look like push come to shove, And so that's something I challenge my interns, myself, other coaches to think about, and challenge everyone on the webinar to think about too. What does it mean to be authentic, to build trust with athletes? Number one, show up early, listen to them, hear about them, allow them to give you critique, allow yourself to kind of come under the microscope and have them, once you've known them for a little while, like ask them for feedback. Hey, what do you like about, what do you feel you're getting? What do you feel like you're not getting? Other little things like once you get to know someone for a while, if they seem like they're having a rough day or an off day, just pull them aside. Hey, Colin, I noticed, you seem a little down today. Everything okay? I think we get so much, again, caught up in this rush that we aren't available to kind of deep dive into our clients' lives and show them that we actually care. Yeah. So again, it's not like an X, Y, or Z formula to do that, but it is important just to, again, challenge ourselves to think, how can I be authentic to this person? How can I show them that I love them? How can I show them that I care for them? Because it's great things to talk about, but we don't really dive into it that much and challenge ourselves on that kind of growth area.
Yeah, and you can see how that'd be difficult, right, to think through that every day. When we're going station to station, I've got a class, and I've got a couple of personal training clients, and I've got to cover the floor, and I've got towels, whatever it is, all those things that come through, and taking a step back and understanding that, hey, we're here to serve these individuals, and how can I show them this, that I do truly care? And I think little things like staying a little late, being a little early when you can, do go a long way. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Especially from a relatedness standpoint between you and the individual. But what I know, you and I talked a little bit about creating relatedness other ways within kind of the population that we're working with, because we can only do so much, especially if you have large groups of people that you're working with.
Yep. Yeah. So coach and athlete, that's one relatedness dynamic. The other related dynamic is like athlete to athlete.
Sure.
And so one of the reasons here at the X main hub facility we don't offer one-on-one training is because we feel it does not build and foster that group of relatedness. It's one thing if we have one person working out by themselves and the coach encourage them, motivating them, that might work for a couple sessions, but over the long haul, that doesn't quite foster the motivation, the relatedness, the bond that can be fostered when there's 2 or more people working together. And so little examples of how we build that, we use like a lot of games, relays, things we have to interact, get together in a group. So say an example that might not be very practical in a corporate setting, but I'll relay how it might be, is with the NFL guys, instead of just doing regular sprints, we might do a relay where guys got to sprint out around a cone, then hand a ball off. And a simple task of handing the ball off, they drop it, they have to communicate, they laugh, they argue. It's funny how it brings a group of 5 people together. And so other things we might do with a client here who is, say, not trained to be a professional athlete, is we might do a relay race with a mini band. So it's not like a mini band around the knees, but one person might do their vertical climber sprint for 30 seconds. They have to run off. They have to swap bands with the next person, and they're going. So it's almost like a triathlon or whatnot. Sure. I think, again, we have a lot of ways to do it here. You might have to be creative how you do it in the more of a corporate or a small space setting. But the more you can get people interacting together and competing together, working together to solve challenges, the better. So that could be probably more within ESD variations.
Yep.
Another thing we do is, say, give them problems to solve, like little things to spice up, say, even movement prep. A lot of times we finish with neural activation, which is some rapid foot movement, hand movement to awaken the nervous system before we take it into a full session. And so pretty typical, you might say drop down to a squat position and then fire the feet. drop gets a little bit boring after a while. It's pretty easy to do. And so we switch things up, and we might say drop on an even number or stay put on an odd number. And after a while, they fail, they laugh, they give each other a hard time. We might spice it up even further, or I might have the athlete standing tall. I say, all right, everyone, if I say a boy's name, you're going to drop. If I a girl's name, you're going to stay. And it sounds super basic, and it is, but inevitably they laugh, they mess up, they encourage each other. They ask, what sort of boy's name's Stacy? And they give each other a hard time. So it's funny and fun ways to build variation in the program that gets the athletes communicating beyond just the basic, okay, drop your feet, etc. So again, I'm not providing any exact games or any ways you can go about this, but challenge the coach to, before you get on the training floor, maybe on your drive to work, maybe in between groups, think about how you can build that athlete cohesiveness within the group, get them to relating to each other, get them working with each other, get them competing alongside teams with each other. Because the more you can strengthen the group in numbers and think that they have like a pack or team mentality, the better, you know. And we see that all the time with our, say, our as high of a group as our NFL Combine class to our 6 p.m. adult boot camp, that when there is a kind of a group cohesion and a bond more than just themselves showing up for the session, but a bond with the overall group and team, that they're here for a bigger purpose than just their own workout. They have accountability to their partner to show up. We get a lot more levels of success. So I would almost call like our adult boot camp here, they're the team, the boot camp team.
Yeah, nice. And I mean, again, that to me, a lot of that programming sounds like kind of partner or team workouts. Again, I think it fits really well at the end of a session. So, because when you are competing, right, people are going to stretch, they're going to do to try and get a little bit more, maybe, which is great. But we also want to make sure that we're not doing that with like super complex movements.
For sure.
So that's why it fits really well within kind of just that ESD or cardio piece towards the end. Maybe it's 5 minutes, a little bit of some type of relay, some type of partner workout. You go, I go, you know, that kind of thing. They talk through it and have to communicate how they're going to break something up,
right?
Whatever it is. So I think that's kind of really, really interesting. And you know, I think one thing that you and I talked about, and it kind of leads us into, I guess, the next piece of the self-determination theory, was kind of starting simple with those things. Like, hey, we start with just drop on our neural activation and work into kind of more complex. That kind of brings us over to how we can kind of create a little bit more competence within our groups. Do you want to kind of talk through about how you think through competence and what kind of coaching aspects you try and drive there?
So competence is a huge one. You know, we work with professional athletes a lot of time here, but a lot of times they show up and they're not that. They might be very confident in their sport or what they do every day from 8 to 5, film, whatever, but they might not be as confident here. And so I try to think from a coach's perspective, what can I do to really just increase their confidence in the workout, increase the ability of them to have success, and because the more they have success, the more they will enjoy things. I think we all like to be critiqued, but we all like to know that we're good at things. So that's a big piece. I think, so from the coaching side, one thing I've noticed earlier on in my career with a lot of my interns or say novice apprentice coaches is they have awesome eyes to kind of critique and see what is wrong. And that's great. We need to know what is wrong before we can fix what is right. We need to know the fundamentals of basic movement patterns and be able to correct them when we see them. Whereas I find a seasoned coach, someone who's been around a while, and what I'm learning the last couple of years is it's great to see those, but just because I see something doesn't mean I coach it. And to kind of understand when to give feedback, but also finding the balance between when to give feedback and when to build up and when to build their esteem and tell them how good of a job they're doing. One kind of story I have from that is we had a NHL captain who'd been in the league for 18 years, and he'd been training here for a little while, and he actually left for a few years. And we were curious because this guy had built a lot of success in the offseason. It was part of his routine. And when he came back, he told us that he would just finish a long season. He would come in as a veteran hockey player, and he felt like all he was told was how poor he was at things. He was critiqued, and he just felt, man, like I can't do anything right here. And so he ended up leaving training here for a couple of years. And that was kind of the big eye-opening for a lot of our staff, was that here's this professional hockey player, he has everything going for him, he's making a lot of money, he's a confident guy, all the most success he could have in a professional sport, and he still can't take tons of critique, you know? And so it was eye-opening thinking that, okay, as coaches, we need to identify error, but the big thing we're trying to do is build them up and build success in the athlete. Because if all we do is tell them what they're doing wrong, their confidence, competence, their ability to feel like they're having success, and ability to feel not like a failure is going to be diminished. I kind of contrast that hockey player coaching experience to a couple weeks ago. Just want everyone to know I'm Canadian, so I don't shoot guns. A couple weeks ago, I learned how to shoot a gun for the first time.
Okay.
It was a little bit nerve-wracking at first, seeing how I've never done that before. But the guy who was instructing me, one of my buddies, he's trying to show me the basics, let me figure it out a little bit, not too much. He was there. But then when I started shooting, he didn't tell me, oh, not a very good shot, you got to shoot a little higher next time. He was encouraging, right? And any sort of cues he had, he kind of framed it in an encouraging way, right? And like, hey, that was a little, like, great position, but that was shot a little low that time, or whatever it was. He made me feel like I actually had some sort of success, even though it was probably a horrible shot. And so I think the big kind of piece of that is, yes, we're not just there to be cheerleaders and to puff people up with horrible technique, because ultimately that's going to lead to injury, and they're not going to build confidence because they're going to be doing things poorly. But how can our coaching style help improve their confidence? Because whether they're athletes or general population people or someone who's never worked out for the first time, they might be coming in to a setting that we're in as trainers and coaches and be rather intimidated. I think that's pretty common, and even athletes are like that. And so what can I do from the coaching side to drop that and that intimidation factor and actually make them feel early on they're good at something? And so, yeah, the hockey player story and the me shooting gun story, I was thinking through that and a couple of different examples of how I think about coaching and how I think about making sure I follow proper etiquette is kind of like a 2-to-1 ratio. And so a lot of times from the X's and O's side, we have 2-to-1 ratios, like, hey, do 2 pulls to every push, etc. But this is more from a coaching side, being I try to give 2 positive feedbacks for every 1, I don't want to say negative feedback, but 1 criticizing feedback, so one thing they might be doing wrong. So an example of that might even be if I see someone on the far end of the weight room doing something improperly, I might be walking there and I might see Colin having great speed on the squat. I might just yell, hey, Colin, great speed on that squat, as I'm walking over to correct someone else. Or if I'm going to come and correct Colin's squat, say he's diving a little too far forward into the toes, I might say, hey, Colin, again, great speed on that bar, just make sure you're sitting back in the heels in that squat. And so really coming at them, encouraging them what they're doing well, as opposed to encouraging or telling them what they're doing wrong. And again, this is where the art of it comes in. You might have someone who just eats up every cue. They want to know what they're doing wrong so they can correct it. And that's fine. You might tell them a little bit more so areas they can improve. But again, that's where you got to kind of use your eye and get to know the person and see, is this someone who takes critical feedback really well? Or is this someone who I might have to build up a little bit more before I can start challenging them with things they are doing wrong?
Yeah. And I think also we know from a motor learning standpoint, if you call out something specific that you want someone to do, whether it's an internal or external cue, they're more likely to repeat that in a way that you want them to. So it's not just necessarily from self-esteem or self-efficacy and the emotional standpoint, which is huge, but also from a biomechanics standpoint, we're probably, by giving those positive cues, we're probably going to get a little bit more long-term out of them, what we want, versus always focusing on the negative.
Right.
So, which is great.
Yeah, because if we always focus on the negative, like you're saying, we highlight the things that are poor in an exercise. And that's one of the things I always challenge my interns to do, is when they're demonstrating an exercise, say what's right, not what's wrong.
Yep. So
if you say don't do this, don't do that, the people are going to a lot of times gravitate towards those things. Yep. And it's not on script, but another little thing that I thought about a little bit, and I implement in my coaching, it is a little weird, but say if Colin, one of the things we're focusing on is sitting back in his heels when he squats, say he starts drifting forward just a little bit, I might encourage him, hey Colin, nice job sitting back in your heels. It's a cue I've worked on for a little bit. They've heard it a lot, and it's sure they might not be doing it perfectly, but it's better than it was. And it's encouraging them that they're doing a good job at something, but it's also like a stimulant or reminder to do something.
Interesting.
Yeah, but so that's kind of like the coaching side of building confidence. A big part I want to touch on is the programming side, and that's a big piece kind of this presentation. And so when we're programming, the biggest thing I think we need to focus on is setting them up for success and confidence in these exercises that we feel are staples in the program. So a lot of times I've heard, people say, I love this coach because no workout's ever the same. It's always different. And it's great. Like, yes, we need to be able to entertain them a little bit, but again, we got to ask ourselves, are we just an entertainer, or are we entertainer and a performance enhancement specialist? And so we got to sit back and think, where can I have variation, and where do I need to have staples and stick to those staples? Because yes, athletes like to be challenged and engaged, but athletes or clients, they both like to see progress. And if we're always just changing the workout on them, they're never going to see progress. It's the same thing as if I try to teach you a sport you've never played before. Say you've never played lacrosse. We try to teach you lacrosse, and then a week later we try to teach you water polo. And then the next week we teach you something else you've never played before. And we cycle back to lacrosse. 8 weeks later, you have no competency, no skill in that sport. And so I think as the coach, we need to think, what are the critical pieces? What are the critical movement patterns of the program? And then keeping those in there. So say you want to focus on like the basics, lunge, squat, hinge, push, pull, keeping those variants in there, and maybe just going for slight modifications in how we load them. But I really want to caution people not to fall into the fad or the area of changing the workout all the time. There are ways to change it, maybe more in our auxiliary block, maybe with different things in our movement prep, like the different command calls we talked about, but to try to keep our primary block, a lot of the exercises pretty similar, so they can really build competency in those areas.
Yeah, because we know that, like learning a sport, strength or improving movement patterns is a skill that we need to develop.
Yep.
So that's, I think, a nice analogy there of like trying to learn a new sport each week or even every other day. Sometimes with our workouts are really all over the place.
Right. And from that boredom perspective too, a lot of times I find myself getting bored with pillar prep, movement prep, strength block. But that's because I'm doing it 4 or 5 times a day. A lot of times our clients who are new, who've only been with us for a few months or even a year, they don't get bored of these things because they're not doing them as much as we are. And if people see progress improvement, they're not going to get bored. Like I have a basketball player right now. We've been doing the same eccentric split squat for 10 weeks, the exact same thing, because he has patellar tendonitis. And I asked him, like, man, are you getting bored of this? He goes, I mean, it's the same thing, but I'm not getting bored because we're getting better. Yeah. So if people see progression and progress, they're not going to get bored. But a lot of times they do get bored because we just jump around from program to program and never focus on one sole goal. And that kind of leads into another piece of building confidence, is setting goals and actually have things we're working towards. And so, someone might not have a goal of running a 4.3 and a 40-yard dash, but if I'm running a boot camp and we give the goal, hey guys, this month one of the things we're trying to work on is improve our pull-up strength or our pillar bridge strength. And there's a theme throughout that program of working on that. We found people are going to have more buy-in, and they're going to base more effort because there's something they're working towards, rather than just I'm here for an hour trying to burn calories. So building goals, and then to evaluate those goals and evaluate if we're having confidence, one of the things that we try to do is build in testing. And so I understand a lot of places, even here, we don't have time to do a full testing eval day. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So thinking, when we program, when can we build into the session little programming pieces, little testing pieces, sorry. And so that might even be, the first Monday of every month, we do some sort of an ESD test, just as a bit of an evaluator scale to see where they're at. But I think, it's very important to take pre and post testing measures to show people their progress. Because if we don't measure, if we don't have values that we're tracking over time, how can they gauge if they're improving or not? How as the coach, can you reference back to see, hey, you've made X amount of progress? So those are kind of a couple pieces I like to implement from the programming standpoint to make sure our athletes are set up for success and building confidence over the long haul.
And you typically will build out with a lot of these things in mind, at least a month or two for your sessions, right? For each class or each group of athletes or each. Correct?
Yeah, some people might be smart enough to build on the fly, but for me, I need to see the big picture. In order to accomplish goals for the clients or the athletes, I need to have progression set in place. And so that's one thing I'll do is say, hey, maybe this month for our boot camp group, which I've coached before, this month we're going to have a pull-up goal. And so, or this 2 months, one of our big goals can be able to do a pull-up. And so I will back plan and write a whole progression and program. So each week we are having a template or periodization that sets them up towards that goal. I've actually included that same pull-up program for some of our viewers here. We've had a lot of people here, say high school soccer girls, general pop people who haven't been able to do a pull-up, and that's a lot of times a huge milestone for people. And so I've kind of included that program as a template here, as someone who could do a pull-up, someone who maybe can do a few.
Yep. And we'll include that document in our Google Drive folders so you guys can get access to it. And actually, John and I are going to kind of sit through, and he's going to talk us through that program. And that'll be an additional video that we're going to shoot for you guys. That'll hopefully be loaded within the next few days. So just to walk through that program so you guys can see what it looks like.
Yeah.
So kind of moving on, I think that kind of ties in a little bit, like pull-up could be tied to someone's goal, right? I think that kind of perfectly brings us to kind of the autonomy piece. You know, take me through like what that means to you as a coach.
Yeah. Just as we wrap up here, autonomy is big because if people don't feel like they have a say in the program or they aren't a part of the program, there isn't just going to be as much involvement from their side of things. So autonomy is an interesting thing. We need to give people options, but if we're giving them too many options early on, they might lose trust in us as the coach. And so as I get to know them better, as we go along the process, I try to give them more options. It could be in terms of loading scheme. So for example, for a professional athlete, they might have their rep maxes and we might have, you know, a minimum load and a maximum load. And then where for our general population folk, I might say, hey, we're doing goblet squat for 8 reps today. Here is the load from 12 kilograms to 20 kilograms. And so you're giving them an area where they can have choice and have part of control of the process. Another simple thing from the kind of programming standpoint is once you get to know your group a little bit, give them options at the end of the workout. And so it's just an example from my NFL group this year. We had a whole lot of guys, and once the session was complete, we have maybe 10 minutes left. I'd say, hey, for everyone who has hip mobility as a goal, you're going to go off into this corner and do this hip mobility series. Exercises that we're already pretty familiar with, so I didn't have to coach them a ton. Folks who had more of a pillar strength goal, you're going to go here and work on these pillar exercises. So right here I have 2 groups. They have choice in the session as to what their goals, what's pertaining to them, as opposed to me just telling them the whole time, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that. And I think the big thing too is, just to close here, when we're coaching for autonomy, is to not jump on people so quickly with cues. And so I see someone do something wrong, and I'll say, hey, fix this, fix that, fix this, fix that. Say, hey, Colin, how'd that lunge feel? A lot of people aren't dumb. If they felt something in their knee, oh, I felt it in my knee. Why do you think you felt it there? And kind of try to refresh and bring some of the light, some of the things you've taught them in the past. Or flip-flop it. Say, okay, that's pretty decent. Now I'm going to be the athlete and show them what they're doing and see if they can correct it themselves. Because the more that you can build their knowledge and their their knowledge of what they're doing and the process they're involved in, the better they're going to be off down the future. Because one day they might not be in your hands for training. And I think the good evaluation tool of a coach is, say you have this person for 4 months. When they leave, are they set up for success to continue training, right? And so that's how I evaluate myself. Like, I had this athlete for 3 months. Did I educate them? Did I empower them enough? Did I work on relatedness, autonomy, and confidence? So where they leave here, they still feel like they can continue what they've been doing.
Yeah. And it's funny, that reminds me of something I've seen at a few sites that when I visited, I try to take some of the classes that my staff are running. And some of the best ones kind of combine a lot of these elements where you've got a member in there who's been coming with you for a while. They're actually helping others. Someone goes to them for help. So they feel like they have ownership of the program. They feel like they have some confidence because they feel, oh, I can help this person. I feel like I'm really good at this. And then you build that relatedness within the group too. So little kind of situations like that, I think with instilling a lot of these concepts can really come to life. And it's a cool environment and cool kind of culture that brings it together. And I think you do a very good job of fostering that. And I think a lot of people don't understand how much of a conscious effort it is on your part to kind of plan that out and to bring it all together each day, kind of despite the challenges that you face.
Yeah.
So we've got some time for some questions here at the end. We've kind of got through the big main chunks, relatedness, competence, autonomy. Maureen's been taking questions, so thank you for sending them in as we've been going through. If you haven't, now is the time. I actually have some questions that I didn't prep John for at all that
Okay.
I'm really curious about. So I'm just gonna kind of buy Maureen a minute or two to kind of get her thoughts ready. But send those questions in for John. You know, now if you haven't been sending them in already, so we've been getting some good ones. But I know for you, you stepped into kind of a pretty interesting situation when you first started working, roughly first started working with a lot of the NFL and the combine guys. You know, I think a lot of your coaching style, a lot of what we're talking about today, the coaching science, art of coaching, is reflected from some of our past employees. Brett Bartholomew, who just wrote a book on art of coaching, Nick Winkelman, who got his PhD on cueing, you know, were kind of around when you were here, and they both left our company to take some pretty, you know, unique opportunities, kind of leaving you as a little bit more of a junior coach at the time to kind of step in. I'd love to hear a little bit of you, just a story or anecdote of how you stepped in being kind of a young coach into filling some big shoes and getting buy-in of these guys who are about to make millions and millions of dollars after going through the combine and the draft process. You know, what are some of those things? Because I think we deal with it a lot in the corporate space of, hey, I'd love to get some more pillar prep or some movement prep in my sessions, but people just want to come in for a half hour and sweat.
Right.
How, you know, what are some things I can do to get some buy-in there? And we've talked about a lot of it today, but just wanted to hear about your story going through that process as well.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting process. Like all of a sudden, a couple of my main mentors, Nick and Brett, Dennis, they had got different positions and left, and then I had making this quick jump from having worked with a few professional athletes, and mostly college, to all of a sudden it's now pro elite. And so there was definitely some bumpy roads and learning experiences through there. I think one thing I started to learn really quickly is if I just give the athletes what I think or what I know they need, they're not going to really trust or want to be around me. And so it's more about just putting out like a perfectly scientific program. It's about putting out a program that's fun and awesome to do, and they want to be there. And so little things like I would listen to the guys, and all the baseball players would want more arm work. And so you have pitchers, like we're trying to, you know, work on the shoulder cuff strength, hip pillar strength. Is doing biceps and triceps going to help that much? Probably not. But is it going to help the overall group cohesiveness, the fun they have? If on Fridays we do 10 minutes of arms, of course, you know. Or my combine guys are always asking, we need more abs, we need more abs. Well, we do a ton of stability chops, offense oblique holds, stuff like that. But their version of abs is feeling the burn, you know. And so just finding little times and pieces like that where we might do a 5-minute crunch side crunch series where is it going to help them run 40 or bench more reps? Probably not, but they feel way better. They're all taking their shirts off afterwards for pictures, et cetera, et cetera. So just doing things to kind of, build my cohesion with the athletes, and making like a fun program, you know. I think if we think about our PE classes back in the day, we loved PE classes. It was fun. We had games. The classes we showed up to, we didn't have to sit and work on technique for a whole hour. Those sucked. And so as bad as it is, trying to think about all my sessions is like glorified PE classes. Like there's things we got to get done, and measurables we got to hit, because it's performance-based outcomes. But also like we got to have fun. We got to enjoy the process. And so also little things like we do pool volleyball on Wednesdays. Like sure, there might be better ways to recover, like doing band mobility stretches or soft tissue. But we go out there and play pool volleyball for an hour, and the guys love it. They're hooting and hollering, and they come back the next day refreshed. And so again, it's going to be unique site to site, but think creatively of how you can alter the program to give people what they really want to do. Because the best program is not what you might write down, but the best program is something they want to attain to and do over a long period of time.
Sure. And you probably plan that out, like when you're going to kind of seed those elements
for sure.
in there.
Yeah.
Because there is still the meat and potatoes that we want to get through.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a circus where, hey, let's do this day, let's do this day. It's a planned out process where Monday, Tuesday, we're doing this. At the end of the day, Tuesday, have a little bit of fun. Wednesday, we're doing regens. We unload, hop in the pool. So, definitely don't want to say just jump in there and do whatever you want to do that day. Have a big plan and then see where the kind of fun and the ways you can stray from the game plan fit into that overall process.
And another thing that actually I'd love to hear more about is because when I've thought of like building relatedness within a group, I've always thought of kind of more the camaraderie, kind of the relationships, maybe creating some role models. But I think you kind of touched on a little bit of like forcing them to communicate and problem solve a little bit. Could you kind of expand on either how you do that or how you feel like some of the benefits you a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the more you can create kind of a team setting, the better. Like ultimately these people come to us and we have 10 individual people. The goal is to have 10 cohesive people. So again, little things like say you're doing ESD, instead of giving them 20 on, 40 off, get into 3 groups, do the exact same thing. Just one person's going to the next, give them a group goal. Yeah. They get the group goal. It's no longer an individual goal. They're high-fiving, they're encouraging each other. Little things like spotting, having someone spot each other. Their hands are there to communicate back and forth. Or every now and then we do competition days, which might not, I don't know how competitive everyone is, but we find when we have athletes huddle around someone and say they're trying to do a pull-up for the first time. If we have people huddle around and encourage them, obviously the effort and the intent and the drive is much, much higher. So again, you have to think creatively, but what things can I do to, again, build cohesiveness, to make that everyone feel like they're more part of a team? And Joel does a great job in our boot camps here. He'll even have people like veterans give a tip of the day. And so veterans speak out, and veterans say, here's one thing I've learned to help me, or here's a thing I do or something I wish I knew 2 years ago when I was starting here. So the more you can give it kind of a locker room sense feel, the better results you're going to have, because then now they're not just there because they're there because they want to be there because their buddies and the friends are there.
Yeah. No, I always like that, the tip of the day or common theme, or even just like question of the day.
Yeah.
What's your favorite food? Ice cream flavor, those types of things, because everyone likes talking about their cheat days and whatnot.
Yeah. And one more piece to add to that, just to build a team cohesive piece. A big thing is, if you see someone new in the group, be quick to introduce them with 1 or 2 people.
Yeah.
Not to introduce them to the whole group, that can be intimidating. Yeah. The first thing I have is introduce them to my intern, introduce them to someone else, just so they don't feel like they're alone or pawned off on the side. Yeah. And then those relationships will naturally build as they go, but you as the coach might need to feel that a little bit early on.
Yeah, and that can be certainly helpful too, especially with a lot of how our sites are set up, where you just have kind of ongoing group sessions. It's not always kind of progressed where everyone starts at the same point and ends at the same point. So bringing that person in and connecting them with others, they can get a little bit help from those.
Definitely.
Versus while you're still trying to manage the rest of the class and provide this great experience for everyone, both the newbie and people who've been around for maybe a couple of years in some instances. So that's satisfied some of my curiosity. Yeah. Maybe Maureen's behind the camera. What are some of the questions we've got for John?
Yeah, so we've got a question here from Kevin, and he was asking, in terms of maximizing engagement, what similarities have you seen across different populations, like between the general pop, college, pro, and elite?
Mm-hmm. In terms of building, yeah, so similarities that I've seen from different populations to build engagement. Number one, people like to see that they are making progression. If people are getting better, they're going to come back. That's one of the reasons, like I have a handful of basketball players right now who've told me blatantly they don't like working out.
No, they don't.
Like they hate it, but they feel way better on the court. Their knees don't hurt as much, and so they come back. And so, yeah, one thing we touched about is very solid programming. Another piece to build engagement is, as a coach, like having enthusiasm for what you do. People can tell when you're authentic and when you're not, when you're passionate about what you do. And so whatever's happened earlier on that day, trying to come in with a smile, you as the coach, trying to ask that person how they're doing, how they're feeling. And then the last piece that we talked about with you, Colin, getting them to work together. And so, again, this takes some thought because you have to program beforehand. But what ways can I get 2 people working together? Maybe it's a circuit where one person's doing a squat, one person's doing a bridge, and they swap back and forth. Or relay circuits like we had the band around our wrist. But people will not do this naturally. You have to, as the coach, have to foster it. And again, I can't put enough importance on it. The more as a coach you are present, you are engaged, you are showing that you enjoy and you're passionate for what you do, the better. Like we've had co-coaches or interns that have come in here that haven't had the biggest amount of knowledge. They show up on a smile with their face every day. They're talking to everyone. They're getting contacts. Like they're coaching every person every session, and people love to be around them. And so I think that's a big thing to get engagement, is having the coach hit everyone every session, smiling, always on the go.
Yeah, I think that ties back to the first thing you talked about of how to show that you care the individuals. I mean, everything that we've talked about, how you communicate to them positively, showing that you care, creating a program, showing that, hey, I've mapped this out for us. It shows that you've invested in them, and they're probably more likely to invest in what you've got going on. It shows that you have confidence in what you do. They're more likely to kind of buy into those things. So no, I think those are really good points.
Yeah, and like you said, creating a program and creating a goal. Like, hey guys, here's our focus. A lot of times people don't have a focus, even if they're not athletes, or they lack vision. They lack basically an endpoint. They lack an area to strive towards.
Sure.
And so that's a huge part. We've seen tons. Like we had a a weight loss challenge program here a little while ago where there were teams of 3 and with our adult group to see who could lose the most weight, who could change their body composition the most. And people were working out like 6 times a day. We had to slow them down. Like there were overuse injuries. It was almost too much.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, cohesiveness, competition, all that stuff works great.
That's great. Got another question here from Kyle, and this gets a little bit more into the programming. How far ahead would you plan out program layouts or themes? 4-week programs or 6-week programs, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question from Kyle. I don't want to say it depends, but it does. I mean, if I have an athlete here for NFL offseason, I'm going to back plan. I'm going to think, you know, what are they, how many fresh they need to be going into camp, and then plan back from there. But with like a group like say a boot camp or a lot of the clientele that some of our folks might be working with who are more long term, I would usually try to plan probably like either working 3-week or 4-week blocks and try to link 2 or 3 of those together. And so I might look at the overall goal, be like, hey, in this phase, our goal is really to build, pull-up strength or push-up strength. And so the first 4 weeks, we're going to have this kind of strategy, and that's going to build into the next 4 weeks for that sort of strategy. So I would challenge, no matter what clientele you're in, try to linking 2 phases together and seeing how progressions build from one phase to the next. Because you can reference that with your clients too. Hey guys, last phase we were working on the eccentrics push-ups and isometric push-ups. This phase we're actually going to transition now into more full rep range push-ups. And so the more you can link those together and show them how one thing in the last phase builds to something else in the current phase, the better. And the more they're going to trust you as the coach, and the more you're going to build that relatedness, because they now see that this coach isn't just coming and bring things off the cuff. They actually have an overall plan to get me to this end destination or goal.
Yeah, and I think that can again work that simple to complex. You know, it showcases that a little bit. And for those who are maybe a little bit nervous about, oh my God, repeating a workout or a plan for 4 weeks, if you think about it, for some of our best attendees, they come 3, maybe 4 times a week to our classes a lot of times, and you repeat kind of a microcycle or a week's worth of workouts, they're only going to see the same workout 3 or 4 times max. Total. And if you're helping them to progress in terms of maybe load or intensity or time, and you call that out, they're going to see that progression that you talked about was so important, and they're probably going to be less worried about, oh, I need to do something different every time.
And they're going to be stoked because they're getting better. You know, like when they see, oh, I lifted 15 pounds 2 weeks ago and I'm lifting 25, like people's confidence goes through the roof, as opposed to, oh, this is just doing different exercises, different workouts every single week.
I think that I have a quick question. We've got about like 8 minutes or so left. So we touched a little bit on some of your on some of the relay games. Do you have any other sort of quick tricks that you pull from your bag
in terms of to build like togetherness and to so relays are big. And we do a lot of like movement skill stuff outside for relay work. Trying to find like little games, like one we play a lot here is spike ball. So getting little things like that, little penny games, like if you have bigger places, we capture the flag, Fort Knox. Again, you can't do that at some settings. So I don't have, to be honest, I don't have the best examples for like small setting, because usually we are on the field or we're inside. But that's what I almost put on the coach to know their clientele, know the space they're working with. And again, just think, how can I get people working together? Because again, the more you can create a group of 10 as opposed to 10 groups of 1, the better off they're going to be having success. So Maureen, you're making me think a little bit about that. I might have to go back to the drawing board and think, you know, if I'm in a small space like this room, how can I do that? Because there's a way. I just have been kind of more towards the small box that I'm working as opposed to this other one.
Sure. I mean, instead of running or something like that for relays, you can think of completing an exercise, and one person goes and the next person goes and the next person goes while you're resting and then going to a next movement. If you still have something like tennis ball or mini band or yoga block or something just to pass off, just to have that physical piece, I think that brings it into play. From like an ESD standpoint, I think you mentioned it. Hey, you could do for time, how far are you getting, and switch back and forth, and then you have to have them go, okay, I'm going to step off the bike this way, you hop on here.
Yep.
So they have to communicate, find those strategies, or hey, for a distance, hey, I want you to, bike, quarter mile, and then I'm going to go, and then I'm going to go.
Yep.
So those types of things you can think through, kind of movements versus like the actual running piece of it,
Yeah.
and that kind of allows you to do more within a certain amount of space,
Right.
which we're limited in a lot of ways. So.
Another good one that springs to my mind, Colin, like countdowns, basically partner countdowns.
Mhm.
So say Colin and I would work together, we can do push-ups. We might do a countdown starting at 6, where I do 6, then Colin does 6, back and forth.
Yeah.
And Colin might be getting real tired. No offense, Colin.
Oh,
At two,
it's a real life situation,
Yeah,
for sure.
at 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's this person, me, who might be pretty awkward and didn't really talk to Colin, but now I'm kind of encouraging him, like, hey, good job, Colin. And then eventually he starts getting more and more encouragement. They finish this challenge, they're high-fiving, don't leave me hanging.
Gotcha.
They're high-fiving, they're feeling good. So countdowns, circuits back and forth, little things like that, to get people interacting more.
No, that's awesome, and that definitely gets the wheels turning a little bit, which I
Yeah.
think is kind of the idea here. I think that we can close probably on this question, just because it might take like a little bit of explanation. So when you're introducing autonomy into a clientele or with a particular group, how soon do you do that? Like when you're starting to work with somebody brand new, maybe that's not the best idea. So like, how soon do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. When to build an autonomy. I think, if someone shows up day one and you tell them, oh, you got 6 to 8 reps or 6 to 12 reps, they're going to probably think, I thought this guy was the professional. And so I think early on, don't give them a ton of autonomy, especially here. It's like chocolate or vanilla in your protein shake. What do you want? That's what it is. But early on, don't give them as much autonomy. Then as you go, and as they see you know what you're doing, you might ask them, say if you have a corrective exercise, hey, do you feel like your hips are really stiff today, or do you feel like you want to work on a little more pillar strength? Give them choices like that, and then you prescribe the proper reps and sets within that choice. So little things like that. We talk about programming simple to complex. I think autonomy, program like little to a lot.
Yeah.
And so over time doing that, and to even some of our very advanced groups that have been here for a while, we might say, hey guys, tomorrow for pillar prep or movement prep, you get to pick your own 3 exercises and run through those. We'll be here for any help or assistance. But again, that's the goal. I want to, as they build their knowledge and understanding and confidence of what they're doing, give them more choices to explore that. Because again, the end goal should be when they leave, they should be able to keep doing most of what they're doing themselves. If they leave and they resort right back to their old habits, they don't know what they're doing, we're almost kind of a crutch for them they were able to walk on for a while and got back to things. So autonomy, there's no perfect answer, but start with a little bit and then build and add as you go.
Nice. Well, I think that's coming up on time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all for your questions and for joining us behind the camera. If we didn't get to your questions or you have something that comes to mind afterwards, again, hit us up at continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. There should be a survey sent out for this as well, so tell us what you think. We'll hopefully see you next month as well, and looking forward to see everyone at the end of August. Thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week.
Cool, thanks guys.